Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back on this very exciting panel on AI. And I have, thanks, Alex, for setting the stage for us. And also, we have a lot to talk about in the next 40 minutes. AI is everywhere. Several days ago, when I was visiting the Singapore Stock Exchange, other than asking me for a pass, they actually look up to the camera, and they take my facial recognition and let me pass. But there are so many questions about AI as well. Data security, whether we understand what AI is doing, whether they're going to tell us what AI is doing, and also what consumers' role in this, and data is our assets as well. So with us, we have three super capable panelists to share with us their views. Let me start with Ayesha. So Ayesha, you give advices to governments and companies about their AI strategy. Now we're at the end of 2019, looking for 2020. What advices you give them? What are the most promising areas?
Well, one of the things that I've been really surprised by is the speed with which more and more governments and large corporations are adopting a data strategy. So when I first started off my company 2 years ago, a lot of them were just interested in artificial intelligence as this magic pony that they read about on the cover of Wired magazine or seen in a movie. And now they have realized that those expectations are unrealistic without dealing with your data first. So what is really interesting to me now is that not only in the West, but in Asia too, more and more companies are thinking of a data plus AI strategy. That's on the one hand. As that's happening, we are seeing in Asia as well, more thought leadership around data and AI governance. Which is also happening here in Singapore with one of the world's first ethical AI frameworks, and more work being done on that. So I think that this acknowledgement that technology and AI is a double-edged sword with great potential, but also we have to govern it carefully, is now steeply taking root in Asia.
Thank you. We'll come back on the governance issue, which is very important to AI, but let's move on to Dirk. Tufsud, did I pronounce the name right? Thank you. So you actually give certificate and training and to companies around the world, and last night you told me around about 120 countries you actually help them to do the standard and certificate. So why your job is related to AI? And also you also told me that you helped to some extent set up the new AI standard in the industry. Share with us on that as well.
That's correct. Basically, AI for us two dimensions. One is it will help us, it does help already, to streamline our processes and make them faster, better quality. In the flippant mood, I would say an expert does basically three things. He looks at things, he reads books to collate the information, and then decides, puts a stamp on it. And especially the looking part is something which is prone to visual analytics. So we use it to basically make our services cheaper, better, higher quality. The second thing is, if we think AI, and I just imagine, because we have talked about it, autonomous driving, connected vehicles, you will have AIs, and already have in terms of the visual recognition of like road signs and other cars in vehicles. Then the question is, what do these algorithms have to do to be deemed roadworthy? And that's not something which is easy, because AI, if it's self-learning, is not deterministic anymore. You have to think about new approaches, how to ensure the quality of the result of an AI. So these are the two things where we and my team are basically engaging around.
Well, before you pass the mic to Derek, I want to ask you, what does a Chief Digital Officer do in your role?
Well, this is a very good question, because I think there's not a single definition of what a Chief Digital Officer does. For me, myself, and I started with TIFF 3 years ago, the first task was defining what a Chief Digital Officer does. So basically where we now arrived after a while is we help the company transform by identifying business areas which are threatened by disruption through AI, for instance, as the cars. You also think through new businesses where we can extend our brand. I mean, TÜV does produce one thing, which is trust. So how can you digitize trust, and how can you bring that to the next century? And the third one, which is the hardest one, is how can we transform the company to take our employees on the journey towards this new world of digital trust?
Thank you. Thank you. And Derek, moving to you, Alibaba, you don't have to explain what Alibaba does. I buy my stuff from Taobao. So it starts with e-commerce and is very big on payment as well. So how important is AI in terms of Alibaba's strategy, especially for you in terms of its overseas strategy?
Okay. As you know, Alibaba has already widely applied AI technology in every business. Alibaba has in the e-commerce, the finance, and the logistics, and even for the entertainment business. In every business, we use, in China, we have already served over 700 million consumers. And we apply AI technology in every user case, such as if you open the Taobao apps, if you don't need to key in some keywords, you can use the camera icon to take a photo for the goods, and then you can search similar merchandise in Taobao. So we just applied the image search. And we also use some voice recognition for the customer service. So we use a lot of AI technology to reduce our labor cost, and we can make a very good user experience and make a lot of innovation. So this is our core competitive capability for Alibaba. So 2 years ago, our CTO of Alibaba Group, Jeff Zhang, announced that we will invest over 100 billion Chinese RMB to establish a Damo Academy. So Damo Academy is our research lab. For Damo Research Lab, we aim into several very cutting-edge technology areas. One is the machine intelligence, including all based on AI, including some image recognition and voice recognition and video recognition. And then the other several things are robotics and chips. So, recently we announced our new chip for the AI chip. So these are the Damo Academy. So, we established several labs in the overseas market. One is Singapore, the other are Israel and US, Silicon Valley. So for me, I'm leading Alibaba Cloud Singapore market, including sales team, marketing team, and the research lab. So we have a Damo AI team based in Singapore. And their target is to do several directions. One is in the voice recognition. They support the Lazada to do business in Southeast Asia. So we can support some voice recognition for the Malay, Indonesian, and some Thailand language, and some other small countries' language. And they can translate from voice to text. And we can also do some natural language process. We can understand and listen to the social media. So these are all leading by the Singapore team. So, and we are very happy to export our technology, which has already served for Alibaba internal business to the Southeast Asia market. So on Alibaba Cloud, we build up a very full stack for the AI technology, including some voice recognition and image recognition and some recommendation engine. So this is what we are doing. And we also build up a local team for the service, for the research, based in Singapore to serve the whole Southeast Asia.
Thank you.
I think that this whole area of natural language processing and voice recognition is one of the most exciting areas in artificial intelligence right now, especially when it comes to Asia, because ASEAN in particular is so fragmented that if you want to reach the population, and some of the things that we work on is customer 360 and custom automation platforms, you need to be able to communicate with people relevant information in a timely manner in their own language. So I believe that this is a very exciting area, but like all areas, I'm sure you read about that Hungarian vice president who got a call from his CEO last month on the weekend, and he said, well, I forgot to send this merchant $225,000. Could you just wire it to them? And he said, fine. It was his boss, so he went ahead and did that. After 2 hours, his boss called back and said, yeah, there was something else I forgot. Could you send another couple of $100,000 to this other merchant? Now, he got suspicious, and he called his boss back. Turns out it was never his boss calling, It was an artificial intelligence program that was mimicking absolutely the accent of his boss. So I think that this is precisely the dilemma that all of us face. The same things that make it possible to reach millions of people and improve commerce and democratize education also have this downside of potentially manipulating consumers. This is, I think, when you talk about the perils and promise of AI in this panel, this is precisely what each one of us faces every day.
Yes. Before I ask Derek all the measures you put in place to hedge against the downside, I want to turn to Dirk first. You've already heard the exciting applications in Asia. How would you compare Asia to Europe in terms of AI on development, application, also regulation regime?
Since you mentioned Hungary, I have to de-average Europe. Europe cannot be generalized in terms of language, as you know. Hungarian is one of these languages which is a nightmare for AIs due to the grammatical structure as Finnish. So excuse me if I take a German-centric view here, but I think there's two big differences between Southeast Asia as I know it, and I lived here for a while, and Europe. I think when you talk AI, Europe is more coming from a things perspective. I mean, I think Asia or Southeast Asia is more coming from a people perspective, but if you look at the industrial legacy or industrial history of Europe, you see that a lot of the AI research is done by large companies. I'll just give you a few numbers so it's kind of, it's tangible. Bosch, which you may know for spark plugs in cars and vacuum cleaners and kitchen appliances, they just had their fourth fund, VC fund, out a volume of 200 million euros, and they're investing 300 plus million euros in their AI research lab in Renningen, which is in Germany. So there's an industrial angle to it, and a lot of the startups we have been looking at have been things startups. So the IoT, the Internet of Things, is one where we say, now that's the second point, due to data protection, or call it data self-determination issues, which I think is a more neutral world, we focus on connecting things, predictive maintenance, looking at how cars behave, and that's different in Asia. Here it's a much more people-centric, language-centric focus.
And how about Ayesha? You advise a lot of governments in the Middle East as well. What's their data protection regulations compared to here in this region?
I think Asia is evolving. Personally, I'm a fan of GDPR. Although when I go to Europe, a lot of my European friends bemoan that it's ruined their innovation spirit, but they might be risk averse to begin with. Look, the idea that data is a human right is something that is very important, and I believe that it is educational for us in Asia to hear that. GDPR is one thing. In Singapore, we have a regulation as well. But California now, just for California, has a new regulation called CCPA, which is has a broader view of what private information is. And of course, Google and all the likes of such companies are fighting tooth and nail to stop this from going forward more aggressively. What I think happens when you have an ethical framework for artificial intelligence is that eventually some innovation happens. And when innovation happens, more funding goes into things that are empathetic and human-centric. So explainable AI, right now, not at that point where we can explain what is happening in AI, but at least we are trying to go that way. For privacy, there's a whole new field called privacy engineering and privacy ops that is coming up with differential privacy and other kinds of algorithms that go some way towards protecting the identity of the individual. So I actually think, precisely because of what you said, because we are so people-centric in Asia, because there are so many of us, let's be honest, I think this is the place where we will see the thought leadership around privacy. And I think that's a counterintuitive thing for me to say, because traditionally we believe that Asians don't care as much. But I believe young millennials and young people, old people like me, we do care. And I think the more we learn in Asia about artificial intelligence and data security and data privacy, I'm very confident that Singapore in particular, given that we already have an ethical framework for AI, have an approach towards data privacy, will actually see a few startups coming up in this area.
I would actually like to support this because we see the same thing in especially Germany, where you say, okay, there is another constraint in the market, and there has to be ways around it. And the going, or the party line right now is that data privacy or data self-determination, i.e. being able to decide how and if you want to monetize your data, is becoming a competitive differentiator. Now the jury is out who will win this. But just a personal piece of information, my daughter's 18 and she's very much aware which data she shares where, and she's not willing to give everything away for free anymore. So I think the pendulum is swinging the other direction. As said, I mean, it can be turned into a differentiator if you learn how to ask the right question in AI, which I think is the biggest problem always. And then make sure you got the right data. More is not necessarily better, but unbiased data to answer this very question.
But I want to borrow a question actually from the previous panel on the smart city, that whether that would be the responsibility of the government to come up with more regulations, or to the consumers to actually protect their own data privacy by knowing more about it. Whose responsibility to ask the right question?
Look, when it comes to protecting citizens, I'll just say one word: governance is the job of the government. So when you put in laws that protect people, then everybody else has their own role to play in it as well. But AI governance, data governance, ultimately comes from the frameworks and the guidelines and the regulations that are set by the government. So it is very much a very important role for the government to play. Now, the dilemma again is, oh, if I throttle them, then nobody will come to the city, we'll lose innovation, we'll lose companies, we'll lose talent. And that is a trade-off that each community needs to actively engage in and be educated enough to engage in. What I find in these discussions is just a knee-jerk reaction, an emotional reaction, that it's about ethics, or it's about morality, or I should do it, or I shouldn't do it, when really it's about governance. It's how are you managing your risk properly. And that an educated, informed citizenry that has been given the education to ask the right questions can together make that decision for their country.
And Dirk, do you agree with Ayesha? Well, she mentioned that there is a stereotype that Asians don't care so much about the data privacy. Or you agree with her that the new thought leadership is coming with the new generation. What do you see in this region?
It's a good one because, I mean, there's a lot of cameras here in Singapore, as there are, by the way, also in the city of London, so not a big difference. I think it's changing, but, you know, and again, I want to borrow something from history. I think the innate recognition that data is a privacy good is a bit more developed in countries who had a bad experience in the past. So GDPR, yes, it's a European thing, but as with lots of governance, it only tells you what you should do or not do, but not how. And I think the how is what the consumers ask for, what the companies ask for, and I think some of the European companies are actually a bit more forward thinking. I want to again borrow from Bosch because I read their webpage. It is part of their mission statement, as it is with BMW and others, which make it actually a point to say, yes, we respect your privacy. And again, and that's now more small and medium-sized businesses, and it has to do with cloud, and I would be interested to hear you on that. I had a few discussions with companies that want to put their production data into the cloud. And as soon as the question comes up, like, where does it physically reside, which I think is a strange question to start with, and you say it's not in Germany, the discussion shuts down. Now, if that's for right or for wrong, that's a different discussion altogether, but there is some sense of property or property loss, which is well developed, maybe not so much in consumers, but businesses certainly do have that.
How about you, Dirk? You're in this region. What's your view on that?
Okay, I think that there are a lot of regulations coming from the government or some industry association, such as for Singapore, we have MTCS, PDPA, even from the financial service, we have OSPA, something like this. I think it's very good and has very clear regulation. But you know, we are at a very initial stage for the AI. So we only get a very small portion of the physical world for the data. So at this moment, maybe in the future, we have more and more IoT devices, we will get more data. But so it's very difficult to define how can data privacy can be regulated, very difficult at this moment because we are very early stage. But from my point of view, I think except the regulation come from some industry or some governments, I think it's a trade-off about data privacy and user experience. So because sometimes if you want to keep very strict data privacy, you won't use the mobile phone, you leave some electric appliance, so you will get more data secure, but it's not convenient for you for the daily life. So sometimes it's a trade-off. You must balance it. If you have too restrict regulation, such as for GDPR or some, maybe it's not very convenient for the innovation. And from my point of view, I think first, all the data be collected. The owner must have the right to know how his data or her data can be used and used by who. So this is very important. And second is, how can you must stay your data very safe. So that doesn't mean. So sometimes maybe for the traditional way, we think the on-premise system is very safe, but then the actual result is not. So we notice a lot of data leak from the traditional way. So how can we use a very comprehensive security technology to keep, store, and share your data? So this is a challenge. So I think there are a lot of companies right now are working on this area. I think public cloud is one of this method. I think so. You will find on public cloud is much safer compared to the on-premise system. So this is my point of view.
I would agree. I think that's one of the reasons. Starting off agile software platforms, innovation is much easier, much faster on the cloud. That's also why the Singapore government has decided to go cloud native. And apart from the citizens' private information that is still kept in a hybrid system, but the rest can be in the cloud because the processing, especially for AI, the compute is much better. And I think the interesting thing is what you pointed out, which is localization of data. And that is very tricky now because we are entering this kind of, globalization is happening. There's a lot of exchange of data. And yet some countries are insisting that if you are a global company, and you come to our country, any data on our citizens must remain here. It cannot leave the bounds physically. But Singapore doesn't have that yet. It's getting there. But there are more and more countries are getting there now.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with that?
Yeah, we also noticed that by this, there are more and more countries pay attention to the data sovereignty. So which means that we must localize all the citizens' data or some sensitive data in local country. So I think this is a very interesting trend, and I partially agree this trend because really in the future maybe the data is more important compared to petroleum or some others. So because this is sometimes we can use data to do a lot of things for the innovation, even for the military use. So this is also for our study. So we, for Alibaba Cloud, we just localize for the data center, even for the talent people, for local people. So we launched our data center in Malaysia, in Indonesia. So this is very, we also, after we launched the data center in these two countries, we noticed there are more and more traditional enterprise, even for the banking customers. They move their cloud business to cloud very fast. But before that, they are very conservative to running the system in-house, on-premise. So, and besides this, we also make the local talent team for the AI, so they can have the customers to do some joint innovation in different locations. Because especially in Southeast Asia, this is a fragment market. Even for different developing countries, they have different culture, have a different business model. So I think this is an inevitable trend for the localization, even for the data, for the talents, AI.
Can I make a provocative statement here?
Go ahead.
So I think that AI on cloud is actually kind of history of the past, because in the end you're pushing out AI to the edge. You can run it on a Raspberry Pi, I mean like really low power, low performance computing platform. And if you go through all the Gartners and IDs, I mean those guys that really kind of know better, reports, they say that actually the AI load is shifting from the data center to the edge, which kind of makes it really hard for companies like ours, because there's not the one instance you can check and certify. You get gazillions out there, and they do things which you cannot control. So what's your view on AI on the edge?
Okay, sure. This is a trend for the AI running on the edge, because sometimes for some mission critical job, we must get a real-time results. If you just upload all the data to maybe a very long distance data center, then you get the result, and then get back the result, maybe such as, for example, in Europe, we support Bosch to do some F1 formula competition. So they put a lot of sensor on the cars, and then they needed to adjust all the parameters for the car. So this must be running very fast in the real time. So we put a lot of edge servers in the running place, and then we can use some IoT devices to sense it. But we don't put all the data because this is the tons of data. We cannot just put on the cloud. So I think in the future, especially for the industry and the manufacturing machines, all these machines are running in real time. So they need to store and need to process the data very close to the machines. So this will build up on the edge servers. So,
when we talk about the capability of AI, one question is inevitable: job. Are we going to have our job 10 years from now? I'm going to keep my job as the moderator 5 years from now. So, and I read from several points prepared by Dirk that expert is dead, long live the expert. Explain to us, how would you say AI will create or destroy more jobs?
I actually really said that the expert is dead, long live the expert. Because, I mean, with each, and by the way, it has nothing to do with my job in an expert organization. That's really my conviction. I think each AI needs some sort of element of training, unless with a general purpose AI, which is still a few years out. So you need somebody who really kind of puts first the question, out there, which is a precise question, which then brings you to select the right algorithm. I mean, there are certain things. We do projects in predictive maintenance for elevators. Do not use a neural network for that. It will never work. Some old school random forest is much better for that, and I'm stopping talking shop. So you have to select the right approach, but then also you have to teach your algorithm what's right, what's wrong, what's a failure, what's not. And that needs some discriminatory skills, some really thinking through the problem and the results. And for that, you need experts. Are they the same experts as today? Maybe not. And there's one thing which is called the 3 Victorian R's, which have been used in the last industrial revolution. It was reading, writing, and calculus. I don't know where the R is, but it has been called the 3 Victorian R's. And it basically was said, if you master these skills, you will have a job in the future. So I'm still looking for the 3 Victorian R's for the AI century. But it will be experts. It will be the power of association. It will be empathy. And it will be communication. I mean, these would be my 3 best guesses with what the R's are.
I want to ask Ayesha the similar question, because this region, Asia, has a young demographic, and it's still, most of it is developing, so where it needs a lot of jobs. But will AI take away these jobs? Or will AI create jobs fast enough to replace that?
I mean, it has a very young population demographic, and they're very optimistic because what they are coming from a very different place. They're just entering the middle class. The rapid urbanization means that 5 people are entering the middle class every single second in the world. The majority of them are in Asia. Now, these people are looking towards uplifting themselves through retraining and upskilling. And these are the same kids, in Indonesia and Pakistan and the Philippines who work in my company. And then we go home and we collapse, and they go back and they take more courses on Coursera, and then they are so driven and motivated. So I actually think, first of all, that this will result in a great digital boom in terms of talent and its increasing demand across the world. Because digital talent and knowledge of data science and AI, as more and more young people in Asia start to study, they'll see globally there's such a dearth of them, they'll see a lot of demand. But the other thing is that doesn't mean everybody should become a data scientist or an AI engineer. We go in every day into very large companies and we build predictive analytics engines, we build forecasting engines, customer 360 engines, but we could never do it without the domain expert who has some experience, who understands the problem statement, together partnering with us. So I think the gap really is twofold. One, we need to learn how to work with each other. So now the 21st century team has data scientists and business people working with each other, and we don't know how to communicate well with each other, but both sides. And then there's a new team player called the artificial intelligence agent. And we need to also learn how to work with that, both by being open to its insights and recommendations, but also being critical of its potential biases. So really kind of treating it as a colleague.
And another question, I want to shift that slightly away from employment, is the black box question. Is AI is developing so rapidly, will we reach to a point that how AI comes to its conclusion, we don't know. Even if AI wants to show us, we won't be able to understand. How are we going to brace up for that future, Dirk?
Okay, so this is about whether we can trust AI, whether we can trust the AI results. From my experience, so because we use a lot of AI technology for Alibaba business, so we also tried compare AI, if we use AI or if we not use AI, so what is the difference? We find actually there is no general purpose AI at this moment. There is only very specific AI combined with some specific use case or scenario. So we only collect very few data from the physical world at this moment. So for example, Alibaba, we always do some recommendation for the e-commerce. So we say we know your preference, we know your behavior. But actually, so we don't know exactly all the behavior you have because we don't have enough data. So at this moment, we only have very small portion data come from the physical world at this moment. So we can refer to AI, but we cannot just trust AI at this moment. We do a lot of statistics for some mission critical decision. We still need some human being, some people to do the interpret or do some validate for the AI's results. Even we do some traffic scheduling or some traffic optimization. We can refer to the result, then we can make a decision by human, but we cannot just let the machine to do all the optimization on the distribution by AI. So this is what I observe from our own business. But I think the other business must be similar because at this moment we don't have so powerful AI. So although a lot of people are talking about AI, but AI right now is very weak at this moment. It can only do very low end, from my observation, very low end jobs. It can reduce the repetitive jobs, such as the customer service, such as the translation and some others. But for some complex job, AI's result is not good enough at this moment.
But what if we fast forward 10 years from now when we have the general purpose AI and we have in our possession a big, large enough data to actually picture the whole full thing? Will we reach to the point that AI will make decisions? Dirk?
Do you mean when?
When and if that comes, what would you do?
If I would know when, I would be rich very soon. I mean, I think the when is a complex question until we reach general purpose AI or until we reach a sentient AI, or these are things when you go into the ethical domain, you'll reach pretty fast. I mean, the pundits have it like 10 to 50 years, depending whom you ask. So who am I to picture the right point in time? I am more concerned about what AI can do to our lives until we reach that point. And even then, and again, taking the car example, and I know this has been milled over several times, a car has to take an ethical decision, which obstacle to hit. Is it a person, or is it a young person, an old person? And even the decision young, old person depends on in which culture you live, or if it actually threatens the driver. So would you buy a car where the AI would say, if there's an iffy situation, somebody might die, I take judgment if I kill you or the pedestrian? I mean, there's a few things which are actually coming up right now. And if you look at how we talk governance, where the governments are, the European Union has just this, I think, April, released their first ethical guidelines for AI development. And this July 2019, installed an expert commission of 33 people who will have to deal with that challenge. So I think we're in the early days, and until we reach the sentient general purpose AI, we have a lot of ethical questions on the path forward here.
All right. So we have a little bit of time left. I'm sure there will be a lot of questions coming from the floor. So I would like to open up to questions from the floor. Anything on the promises or perils of AI? Identify yourself briefly, and also tell us who you want to ask the question. Yes, this gentleman in the middle.
Hi, my name is Joseph. I'm an entrepreneur from Shenzhen. I notice a lot of the AI technologies that we're developing are emerging at a time where simultaneously a lot of people are coming online for the first time. And they're using this technology without prior experience with things like terms of service and understanding how their data is being used. And I'm wondering if you guys think that technology, such as AI, could play a role in communicating how they are being impacted by the technologies that they're using.
Good question. Who wants to take that first? Ayesha?
Absolutely. I think I was just reading about this app that actually goes through your entire licensing agreement, that all of us just download an app and say, I agree, I agree. But it actually goes through the whole thing and tells you if there are any red flags. It doesn't use AI, it just uses some natural language processing and has some red flags. But what we will see more and more now are two things. Number one, we'll see more companies coming either because of the regulation or because of the activism of young people and other people trying to figure out ways, algorithmically and otherwise, to preserve the privacy or to defend the privacy of people or to inform them as they engage with technology of any red flags, manipulation, privacy invasion, etc. And I think this is going to make quite a lot of difference and will improve the way that children, especially who are coming forward, are exposed to it. And secondly, we are also seeing a lot more governance around young people. I mean, maybe you were talking about teenagers, but as a mom, I'm always concerned about kids. And there are really laws coming around the usage of kids and their data, and because they don't have any agency yet. And so they should definitely have the right to delete all their data, to access it, and more than that, there have to be regulations around how companies approach them and how they interact with social media, etc.
Thank you.
I have nothing else to add, just the fact that I remember when I was a teenager using Facebook for the first time, and there's a lot of data that I would rather not be in a machine learning model about me.
Any more questions? Yes, Steffi? Ooh, Dirk, you want to take this one?
Because I'm the resident geek, or? I'd love to take it, and I think, was it a week ago, a few companies are actually now working with hybrid quantum normal computing, and I think now the whole thing starts making a lot of sense. I think quantum computing will accelerate certain aspects of AI. I mean, prime factor divisions and stuff like that. It will revolutionize cryptography. It will also have severe impact on how we do pattern recognition. But I'm currently not quite sure how it will really propel AI forward. I think there's still a lot of work to do, but again, I mean, having the first hybrid quantum, non-quantum computer out there, this will be something to watch.
I think one of the things is that AI itself is undergoing continual evolution. Right now, deep mining or deep learning and reinforcement learning, all of these are very dependent on large amounts of data. But there's a growing group of AI researchers who are beginning to think that this path will end up in a dead end. It definitely cannot lead to general AI. And so there will be interesting for us to see what else happens. If we think AI itself will also be using the same kind of neural networks that I mean, I used like 20 years ago and are still using with some sophistication now, it may not be the case. We might have a combination of symbolic systems and deep learning systems. And I think that's an area, especially for students and young researchers, that's really interesting to watch.
Thank you. We're running out of time, but I want to wrap up by asking one simple sharing from each of our panelists. Well, we talk about a lot of promises, but I want to end on the perils. What keeps you awake at night regarding AI? Just one single thing, starting with Dirk.
So you mean about AI?
Yes. What worries you? What keeps you awake at night?
I think at this moment, we are in very early stage of AI. I think there are a lot of things we cannot imagine at this moment. So we just talk, actually for the AI's technology, we just use the very fundamental algorithm. So maybe several decades ago, we have already applied. So maybe in the future, for us, we can find more AI innovation combined with the industry in the future.
So more on the promise side. Dirk, how about you?
Maybe some of you remember Tay, the chatbot from Microsoft that went totally haywire. So if I would have to put into one word, it's bias. Bias can screw up the best AI, and it's garbage in, garbage out, as in any engineering discipline. And if something scares me, it's bias towards a purpose. And that might, derail the whole, the potential we see in AI.
Bias towards the purpose, that's the peril. And Ayesha, last word.
Well, my only line to everyone here would be to say, this is not a movie. A lot of us, we go to panels, we listen to people, and then la-di-la-di-la, we forget all about it. My worst fear is being in a world where all of us are not awake and alert and paying attention and upskilling ourselves to understand the impact and the benefits of AI. Each one of us should empower ourselves. We don't want to end up where we are with climate change. And I think that the moment is now. So I think that is my worst fear, is when some elite patronizing group of panelists is supposed to have the answer, or some government is supposed to have the answer. I think together we can get the best out of this.
That's a very powerful message. And with that, let's end our conversation. And that's exactly why we come to DLD, to keep us awake and alert by our discussion. So join me in thanking our panelists today. We had a wonderful discussion. Thank you.